Hello, in this video I'm going to discuss on the outcomes of this class in my personal and skill development. Now, starting with the personal development, I was able to demonstrate efficiency in applying my innate curiosity and creativity. I feel very confident in this very outcome, and I got to demonstrate it in the first week when I was able to help one of my teammates, Ryan, who was our driver for that week, to find out the problem he was having with the node modules that didn't allow our project to run. And I was also able to, I feel very confident in my exploration, my ability to explore my environment and get to understand and become familiar with it. I think this happened exactly more when we were working on the Sleep Outside project. I had to do a lot of exploration, testing different parts of the project to get acquainted with what each part of the code, the already existing code, was supposed to do, and then figure out what the incomplete part of the project was also to do. I also enjoyed working and especially learning from my teammates. In the third week, I successfully helped Sylvie to get on track with the rest of the team after we spent some hours together. I also feel very confident in my use of the divide and conquer approach. I think this was something very helpful in the fifth week when we had to split up the final project into different parts, which could be split for different members of the group. This was very practical, as we had to look at the whole project and then split it up into different parts, and which we assigned into the Trello cards, and was able to make the working on the project a lot easier. Troubleshooting and finding bugs was something I had to do every single week of this class, but in the sixth week I demonstrated it while working with the geolocation API. This was used to get the location of the user for our weather sites. Now, I'm talking about the skill development outcome. I was able to develop my JavaScript skills, and as well as my use of third-party APIs and the JSON. I'm going to talk about the JavaScript. I think basically the part of the project, our final project I worked on, was the JavaScript, and so I wrote the main.mjs file. So I'm going to show them here. This main.mjs, this is like the main controller. I was the one who wrote this very code, and this is responsible for the whole event there, when this is able to control other parts of the code. This is responsible for calling the necessary functions and methods that can generate the necessary data for the users. And I also wrote the degree type. This very module contains the code that determines the unit for the temperature details. For instance, this determines whether the temperature, the weather details will come as a metric unit, or the imperial. And so this works with the checkboxes that we have on our site. So I'm just going to open up our site. So here is our site, and down here we have these little checkboxes which the user uses to select which unit, whether the Celsius or the Fahrenheit unit, for the temperature. And so the degree type JavaScript code which I wrote is responsible for selecting the correct temperature unit based on the checkbox that was selected by the user. Okay, I also wrote parts of the utils. I wrote this little display element function here, which I'm still going to talk about in a bit, and I also wrote parts of the get the current location. So this very function which returns a promise was written by me. I used this very function to get the user's current location. So here on the site we have this very functionality where a user can click on this button and can grant access to for the use of his or her location, and once it is allowed, the current city will be generated and used to generate weather data for the site, as well as forecast, extended forecast of data for 5 days. So I wrote the get current location data, which is also used in the main.js. I also wrote some parts of the get APIs. So generally speaking, my JavaScript functionality or ability was increased to a very high level. That is why I gave myself the rating of 4 right here. I also made use of third-party APIs. I specifically used the geolocation API, where I talked about just some seconds ago, specifically in the current location. In this very file, I used the geolocation.getCurrentPosition, which was used to generate the user's current position. I also used the OpenWeather API to get the weather data for the longitude and latitude of the user. Okay, so I also made use of the JSON. I think JSON is one of the technologies that I used mostly in the project, and I got to understand how to use it. Even to create JSON files, I could understand that mostly the working with the OpenWeather APIs allowed me to make use of the JSON, as I had to convert the results of the OpenWeather API into JSON and then extracted the data from the JSON and populated the page. So all the data that can be seen here on this was all gotten from a JSON. So all the data that's seen here is gotten from a JSON. So working on this final project helped me to demonstrate that. I also worked on my CSS skills. I feel very confident on my use of CSS. You can see that if I reload this page, the weather summary box, the box that contains the weather summary right here, is not being seen currently. That's because it is hidden. And so when I search for a city, let's say Utah, and select this, search for it, and you can see that the box that contains the details of the Utah weather it appears. So this functionality was done using CSS. I was the one who handled that part of the project, and the code can be found here. And in the small.css, where I had to display the elements that's the container for those details, where I had to display them as none. So yes, so still a little bit down here. So right here I was able to display those details as none, and then was able to change it with JavaScript. I used events. I used the click event, the submit event, the key down event to handle different functionalities of the code. The search button here, I used the key down event to be able to identify when someone is typing data into this, to be able to generate these little these hints that are here. For instance, when I start typing Utah, see that there is a suggestion here generated. I think that was done with the key down event. And also when a location is typed and this button is clicked and is submitted, the search would happen, and so the data will be generated. Now I also use the click event on this very button here to be able to get the geolocation work. I also used the local storage. The local storage was very helpful in storing the city of the user and also the longitude and latitude. And normally when a user visits this very page, he can be able to get correct data, weather data, without selecting either of these units here. So I use the local storage to select or to store the units that a user selected. For instance, if I select Fahrenheit and I get the local storage and I get the weather data, so you can see that all my units are in Fahrenheit. Now when I reload this page and so when I reload the page and I select the access my current location again, you can see that even without selecting the Fahrenheit, the units is in Fahrenheit. That's because I use the local storage to store the previous unit the user selected, and so the next time the user is using it, if the user doesn't select a particular unit, I use the previous one that the user selected to generate the data. And so if I open up my local storage, you can see the unit which is imperial for the Fahrenheit that was used. So the local storage also used to store the longitude, latitude, and the city, as I mentioned earlier. So thank you so much for being with me throughout this video.